I want to tell you about the most common conversation I have with high school pitchers who come into my program and struggle in the first few weeks. They show up motivated, they're ready to work, they have seen the videos, and they are convinced that this is the thing that is finally going to move the needle for them. And then reality hits. The recovery days, the volume throwing sessions, the mobility work, the strength blocks, the weeks where the radar gun stays in the bag and the only goal is to build the foundation that velocity eventually sits on. And somewhere in those first few weeks, the confusion sets in. This is not what they thought it was going to look like. That confusion is not a character flaw. It is the symptom of the biggest development mistake high school pitchers make. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that mistake is, why it's so easy to make, and what the process actually looks like when it's done correctly. Stay until the end because I'm going to show you the 4 compounding mistakes that stack on top of each other and keep talented pitchers stuck for years. And I'm going to tell you what happened to the pitchers who were just as confused as you might be right now and trusted the process anyway. The problem starts before a pitcher ever sets foot in a training facility or starts the program. It starts with what he thinks development is supposed to look like and where that picture came from. Here's what most high school pitchers believe about development before they have ever been in a real system. They believe it's going to look like what they see on Instagram or on TikTok. The TrackMan sessions with wicked pitch movement, the pull-down videos where guys are airing at 95, 100 plus, the radar gun readings going up week after week, the highlight clips, the transformation reels, the before and after velocity posts. And don't get me wrong, that content is real. Those results did happen. But what that content never shows you is the 90 to 95% of the development process that does not actually look like any of that. The recovery days where the arm is doing nothing, the velocity, the volume throwing sessions where the only goal is to build tissue tolerance and the velocity is deliberately dialed back. The weeks in the weight room where you're not touching a baseball at all. The days where progress is invisible, where nothing feels different and the only evidence that the work is happening is that the plan is telling you it is. And that is what development actually looks like. It's not a highlight, it's not a reel, a system. And when a pitcher walks into that system expecting the highlight and gets the process instead, one of 2 things happen. Either he trusts it and stays the course, or the confusion turns into doubt. The doubt turns into disengagement, and the disengagement turns into a pitcher who's never fully invested in the work he needed to do to actually improve. That is the root of the biggest development mistake. Not a bad drill, not a wrong program, a wrong mental model of what development is. Built by an algorithm that only shows you the exciting parts. And it compounds. Because sitting underneath that wrong mental model are 4 specific mistakes that stack on top of each other. The first mistake, and the one that every other mistake flows from, is this. Pitchers treat development as an event, not a system. An event is a beginning, a middle, and an end. You go to a lesson, you work on a mechanical cue, you leave. You go to a showcase, you get seen, you leave. You do a training session, you feel good, you leave. Each thing is its own isolated moment. And when the moment is over, development is too. On the days the radar gun is out and the days that it is not. On the days the work is exciting and on the days it is boring. A system connects everything. The strength work feeds velocity. The velocity feeds the arsenal. The arsenal feeds the command. The command feeds the performance. Nothing is isolated and everything compounds. And here is the critical difference. Event-based development produces event-based results. You get a little better after a lesson, you feel sharper after a good bullpen, but the gains do not stick because there is no development system underneath to anchor the progress to something permanent. 2 weeks later, you're back where you started, buying another lesson, booking another session, wondering why the improvement never seems to last. The pitchers who make real jumps are not the ones who found the right drill or the right coach or the right training session. They're the ones who committed to a system long enough for the compounding to kick in. And compounding in development, just like compounding in finance, does not feel like much in week 2 or 3, but it feels like everything in week 12 and week 16. But you have to get there first, and most pitchers never do because the next mistake pulls them out of that system before the compounding has ever had a chance to start. The second mistake is the one that the industry has built itself around and is the reason most pitchers spend years going to lessons and never actually develop. The lesson model is built on convenience. You book an hour, you show up, a coach looks at your mechanics, gives you a cue or 2, maybe you throw a bullpen, and then he sends you home with something to work on. And you feel good leaving because something happened, because something was addressed, progress was made. But here's the problem. 1 or 2 hours a week of coaching with no structured throwing program, no strength and conditioning built for pitching, no arm care protocol, no recovery system does not produce development. It produces awareness. And awareness is not development. Awareness is just knowing what needs to change. Development is the daily, structured, intentional process of actually changing it. Think about what a real development system looks like compared to a lesson. A lesson is 1 hour. A real system is what happens across 7 days, the throwing days, the work strength days, the recovery days, the arm care sessions, the bullpen structure, the intent work, all of it connected, all of it building toward the same outcome. And the hardest thing to tell a family who has been investing in lessons for 3 years is this. The investment was not wrong. The container was wrong. Lessons taught their son things. But without a system underneath to anchor and express what he learned, those lessons produced awareness that never became performance. And I see this all the time. Pitchers who have been getting lessons since they were 12, they have great feel for the mechanics. They know exactly what their arm path is supposed to look like. They can describe their delivery in detail. But when they get in a game and none of it shows up, because knowing and doing are completely different things. And doing requires repetition inside a system, not inside from an hour-long session once a week. The lesson model will always have a place in development. A great coach giving a pitcher specific feedback in a focused session is valuable, but only valuable when it sits inside of a larger system that gives the pitcher the daily structure to actually apply and own what he learned. Because without that system, the lesson is just an expensive conversation. And here is where the third mistake makes everything worse. Because even the pitchers who do have some structure often make this one. The third mistake is one I want to tell you a story about. Because I think most pitchers watching this are going to recognize this guy immediately. Because they've either been this guy or they've played with this guy. And you know who I'm talking about. He's the hardest thrower on every team he's ever been on. Since he was 13 years old, he was the guy. He threw harder than everyone else in his age group, and that one fact carried him through almost every level he ever competed at. Little League, dominant. Middle school, untouchable. JV as a freshman, starting ace. The Raider gun has always been his best friend, and somewhere along the way, because the velocity was always enough, he never had to develop anything else. His fastball is flat, it comes out of his hand, and it goes straight, hard and straight. No ride, no run, no shape that makes a hitter's bat path work against him. Just a straight line from his hand to the catcher's mitt at 91 miles an hour. His breaking ball exists, but it's not a weapon. It is what he throws when he needs to show something different. And hitters at the higher levels know it the moment it comes out of his hand because the shape is inconsistent, the depth is unreliable, and he cannot throw it in a 2-strike count with real confidence. His changeup, if he even has one, is an afterthought. Maybe he throws it twice a game, maybe less, because he never needed it. The fastball was always enough. And here is what happens to this pitcher when he gets to the highest level of high school baseball or even steps into a college program. The hitters are better. The scouting is real. The coaches have video. And a one-pitch pitcher at any level, even one who throws 91, is not a weapon. He is a puzzle that takes exactly one at-bat to solve, sit on the fastball, lay off the breaking ball, make him throw the changeup. Done. The velocity that carried him through 6 years becomes the things that expose him. Because the hitters at that level can handle 91 if they know it is coming and they know nothing else is coming with it. I've seen this play out more times than I can count. Talented arms, real velocity, legitimate physical tools, and a profile that is so one-dimensional that the ceiling they should have reached never materializes. Because no one ever stopped them long enough to say the hard thing. You have the engine, but the engine is the only thing you've built. Here's the truth about what makes the pitcher undeniable at the next level. It is not the hardest thrower in the room. It is the pitcher who throws hard enough and has real weapons. A breaking ball with a shape hitters cannot barrel, a changeup with enough separation to disrupt timing, the ability to command the fastball to both sides of the plate. That combination is what makes a pitcher impossible to prepare for. That combination is what earns high leverage innings. That combination is what gets the phone calls from college coaches or pro scouts. The velocity is the price of admission at the higher levels. It gets you in the room, but what you do once you were in the room, the arsenal you built, the command you trained, the weapons you developed, that is what determines whether you stay. Development has to build the full picture, not the velocity at the expense of everything else. Velocity and mechanics and pitch design and command and the mental framework to compete under pressure, all of it together. Because the pitcher who threw 91 and never built anything else is going to watch the pitcher who throws 87 with 3 real weapons earn every inning he thought was his. And here's the part most pitchers never hear. When you chase velocity in isolation, skipping pitch design sessions, ignoring command work, you actually suppress the conditions that velocity needs to keep improving. The intent work without movement work produces a faster, flat fastball. The pull downs without the arsenal development produce a ceiling with nothing to stand on. The fourth mistake is the one that ties all of this together, and it is the one that explains why pitchers can make all 3 of the previous mistakes for years and still feel like they're doing the right thing. The fourth mistake is the one we covered in depth in the last video, but I want to come back at it from a different angle here, because in the context of everything we've talked about today, it hits differently. Most high school pitchers skip the offseason. They play year-round, spring into summer, into fall, back into winter bullpens, and then back into the spring again. And the reason they do it is not because they're lazy or undisciplined. It is because that's what they've been told, directly or indirectly, that stopping is falling behind. That fear is the engine of the travel ball industry. It is why families spend $5,000 to $10,000 on a single fall season. It is why pitchers throw 10 months in a year. It is why the offseason, the most valuable development window in a pitcher's entire year, gets filled with more competition instead of intentional training. And here's what that decision actually costs. The offseason is not rest. A real offseason is the only time in a year when a pitcher can build the qualities that competition mode will never allow him to build. Maximum strength, tissue capacity, velocity through progressive overload, new pitch shapes, mechanical refinements that require the freedom to fail. All of these things that we talked about in mistake 1 through 3, building a real system, training beyond lessons, developing the full pitcher, all of them require the offseason to actually happen. Without the offseason, there is no system. There is no daily development. There is no full pitcher being built. It is just competition, maintenance, and survival. And the pitcher arrives at his junior year with the same stuff he had his freshman year, confused about why the work he put in did not produce the growth he expected. Now here is what I want you to understand about how all 4 of these mistakes connect. They all flow from the same place, a distorted picture of what development is supposed to look like, built by social media that shows the highlights and hides the process, by an industry that profits from keeping pitchers in competition mode, and by a culture that measures development in games played and showcases attended rather than actual physical and skill adaptation. When a pitcher believes that development is an event, he buys lessons. When he buys lessons without a system, the gains never stick. When the gains never stick, he chases one metric he can see and measure easily, which is velocity. And when velocity does not move fast enough, he fills his offseason with more gains because at least he feels productive. Each mistake feeds the next, and the whole system runs on the same fuel, a wrong mental model of what development actually looks like and what it actually requires. So what does real development actually look like? Not the Instagram version, not the highlight reel, the actual process that produces the pitchers who throw harder at 18 than they did at 15, who show up at showcases with a complete arsenal, who earn the innings that matter, and build the kind of profile that colleges and scouts actually respond to. A strength block where the only goal is to build force production. No TrackMan, no radar gun, just progressive overload that builds the engine velocity eventually sits on. A throwing ramp up that builds tissue tolerance before intent ever gets introduced. A velocity phase where max intent throwing is programmed in structured doses with real recovery between sessions. A pitch design block where new shapes get developed with the freedom to miss and refine. A command phase where the patterns built in training get hardened under competitive pressure. And then a season where all it gets expressed. That is development. That is what the 90% looks like that nobody posts about. And every single step of it is essential. You cannot skip the boring parts and keep the results. The boring parts are where the results come from. The pitchers I described in the first 30 seconds of this video, the ones who were confused in week 2 or 3, who expected the highlight and got the process instead, the ones who stayed, they are the ones showing up to spring trials throwing 4 to 6 miles an hour harder than they did in October. They are the ones whose breaking balls is now a weapon. They are the ones whose coaches are calling, asking about what changed. What changed is that they trusted the process long enough for it to work. That is the rarest quality in pitcher development. And it is the one that separates the pitchers who reach their ceiling from the ones who spend their entire career wondering why they never did. So here is where you are right now. You have just seen the 4 mistakes, and if you're being honest with yourself, you recognize at least one of them, maybe all 4. That recognition is the first step, but recognition alone does not change anything. The pitcher who watches the video, nods along, and then goes right back to the same lesson and the same travel ball schedule and the same velocity chasing approach without the system underneath, that pitcher is going to be in the exact same place 12 months from now. The pitchers who actually change their trajectory are the ones that take what they just learned and attach it to a real plan, a system that runs every day, that builds the full picture, that uses the offseason intentionally, that treats development as the serious structured daily process that it actually is, not the highlight reel that social media made it look like. That is exactly what we build inside the Power Pitcher Pathway. A complete development system, individualized throwing programs, baseball-specific strength, pitch design, arm care, and weekly coaching feedback, built around what you specifically need and where your system is specifically leaking. If you are ready to stop chasing the highlight and start building the system, the link to apply is in the description. A direct application to work with me, a real conversation about where your development is leaking and whether PPP is the right system to fix it. Pitchers who become undeniable are not the ones who found the right shortcut. They're the ones who built the right system and trusted it long enough to let it work. Apply in the description below, and if you're not ready yet, watch this video next.